This is an SM Media production.
Hi, folks, and welcome to episode 20 of Chronicle, the Rangers journey, right here on SM Media. I'm Scott McPike. It's an absolute pleasure to be your host as always. Last week, we did a wee recap show where we looked at the first 23 years of the journey from David Murray taking over in 1988 right up until just before he sold the club in 2011. And we spoke about a lot of stuff. There was a lot to get into. There was a lot of on-field, off-the-field stuff. And as after his magnificent performance last week, it is an absolute pleasure to welcome back to the show Craig Rae. Craig, welcome back. It is a pleasure to have you on.
Well, thanks very much for that, Scott. You must be the first person in a while to say I've had a magnificent performance. So I'll take the compliment. But no, it was a good one we had. Obviously last time round, and I'm looking forward to this one because I think there'll be you know a lot of downs in this one, but towards the end we'll get to a few ups. So
Yeah,
it should be good.
it's like a proper it's like a proper roller coaster, isn't it? It's down and it keeps on going down, and then it hits a point where it can only go back, it can only go up the way, and it does. And we'll talk a lot about on the field stuff. And on the field there was a lot of ups and downs, and I think only really recently we're now at a stage where we can say Rangers are back to where they should be. And this whole where we kind of close, where we kind of start this bit of the show, like when we spoke last week, when Murray sold the club, when Murray was kind of selling the club, Rangers were in the middle, were going for a third title in a row. The budget was so thin. I mean, Walter Smith worked wonders. And round about the time Murray was selling up, it did feel there was a bit more kind of encouragement in the air. When did you first hear the name Craig Whyte?
For me, it would have been, I can't remember exactly the date of the month, maybe early 2011, when it was basically in the front page of the Daily Record that this billionaire was going to take over Rangers.
Oh yeah,
Um, you know, and then it turned out that you couldn't actually trace where this guy's money had came from.
yeah,
But we will get to that later on. But no, my initial thoughts on Craig Whyte, I think was the same as pretty much every Rangers fan. At the time I would have been 14, 15, so my knowledge on finance and accounts was limited then. It's grown a wee bit now, not quite at the level of some people in Glasgow. As we know, we're all experts in litigation and accountancy nowadays. Hint, hint. But no, I think on the face of it, it looked good. That was back in a time when people like me still would have trusted newspapers. You're looking
yeah.
at it, you're saying this guy's going to take Rangers over, and I think initial reactions probably relief, maybe. I think so. I were to use at the time because
I
we
think it
seen
was
what
that
was
hope.
happening.
Yeah,
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 hope, belief, relief. We'd seen what was happening with David Murray. The 3 years on the field were good, but off the field it was a complete shambles. You had the bank running the club, you had players being sold. As you say, Walter worked miracles to get those 3 leagues in a row. And we were looking at a future that, we were hoping we were going to get money to spend, about to do three in a row, and we were going for four in a row at that time. And I felt going into that summer with everything that was certainly promised. I think because I can't remember exactly how much, but it was promised a big transfer budget that summer. There was talk, I think, like Carlos Cuellar coming back. Um, so at the time it was a good time to be a Rangers fan, but as we know, within a few months that all started to unravel.
yeah. I mean, that is the thing. We can think now with the benefit of hindsight as how did this ever see the light of day? It was because not only was David Murray desperate, the fans were desperate. The fans were just desperate for change. We'll speak about this. Somebody made a good point all day, and something I was listening to. All look, you're probably similar age to me, maybe a couple of years kind of difference, but all we had from Murray in the 2000s was constant. Just there was something wrong. We have to do this. We have to sell players. We have to cut our cloth and things like that. And the idea of a Rangers fan as he was portrayed, with wealth off the radar and this whole thing, like back in the days, you say, when we could trust newspapers and we maybe were hoodwinked a wee bit. It was very plausible. It was, you're getting into it with your eyes wide shut. Like, this sounds amazing. Let's just get on board with that. And it's this perfect storm in a way of Whyte coming in 2011. He buys the club he gets the club for £1. He clears the bank debt. We didn't know at the time how he was clearing the bank debt, but hearing all that, like, it was the 18 million bank debt was getting cleared. It just all sounded exactly what Rangers needed.
It did, and it's that positivity. I think that's what a lot of football fans sort of long for. It's as they say, it's a hope that kills you.
Yeah.
But that summer, I think kind of blissful ignorance is maybe a good phrase to use to describe it, because we, as I say, came off the back of a 3 in a row. My whole life that I can remember, Rangers up until this point, I don't remember the frivolous spending under advocate. I was alive for it, but I don't remember it. I first started to get really, really into Rangers and remember stuff when Alex McLeish was the manager. So all I knew of Rangers from a signing players point of view was sell, sell, sell. We'd never had in that time a real marquee signing. Maybe Pedro Mendes is probably the best you could have hoped for, bringing Barry Ferguson back, and the possibility of going out and spending big money. You're hearing that this guy's a billionaire as well. As I say, that blissful ignorance, and especially at the start, we hear that he's doing stuff like clearing the bank debt and whatnot, and it all seems very, very plausible. But as I say, it turned out not to be the case.
I remember when alarm bells first started ringing, and it probably was written. Do you remember some of the transfer bids that were going in that summer? I mean,
that was like £1 for David Goodwillie, and then Dundee United wanted like 3 million, and then we upped it to like £2. I mean, at least we doubled it, in fairness. But
and that was how bad it was. It was like, I mean, the Queller one sticks out to me like a sore thumb. Like, Rangers had agreed a fee. It was something like £1.5 million. And never went in with agreed a fee and never went in for the personal terms. Like, do you know what I mean? It was so much. Like, I remember who was the guy from Holland? Verhoek, remember him? The winger. They were trying to sign a winger from Holland. I think his name was Wesley Verhoek or something like that. And Den Haag, I'm sure it was, wanted like £1 million, and Rangers offered 100 grand. Do you know what I mean? That's not. And I remember at the time being guilty of this, and I don't know. It is that blindness at the time of like, he's new into football. Whyte, he doesn't know how negotiation works. Do you know what I mean? He doesn't know. Like, he's obviously a very shrewd negotiator. He was doing that because he wasn't really wanting them. He was just. It was all to save face and look like he was doing something, and eventually, obviously, he does. The players do come in, the likes of Lee Wallace and like Boccanegra and things like that. But that's when it first seemed to me like there's something weird happening here. Like, this isn't what we expected, and obviously, the European exits that. Remember that Malmo, I'll never forget looking at his face after Maribor, and I remember the camera goes to him when Rangers are going 2-1 down, and he looks like a man who's just absolutely screwed.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the alarm bells first ringing, I think for most people it would have been those weird transfer bids. For me personally, though, it would have been maybe October, November time when the BBC documentaries aired, because as I say, at the time, I was probably looking at it from a positive point of view, saying, okay, we've not, brought in maybe the players you're expecting, but we've still signed players. We've not sold anyone. We never sold anyone that summer. We had Jelavic, we had Davis. In fact, that something that I just remembered there off the top of my head. Whittaker, Davis, McGregor were all given, I think, new like 4 or 5 year contracts at the start. So it was kind of like we mean business. So we kept all our best players who were still at a good. You're talking about the age of maybe 25, 26, if you want to put it into maybe modern day terms. Kenneth Morelos, for example, signing long term deals. It was that kind of situation. And as I say, we never sold anyone. We brought players in, and the team on the pitch actually started that season very, very well. Drew the first game with Hearts at Ibrox, but went on a big winning run, beat Celtic 4-2 that first Old Firm game, and we're unbeaten up until I think Kilmarnock at the end of November. Um, Naismith got injured about a month before that. That was probably you know a turning point. But on the park, things were going well. So, and I think it's the same with most people. When you see your team doing well on the park, you know, does anything else really matter? You know, that's if you're a football fan, that is the one thing that you long for. It's your team to be successful in the park, and to hell with anything that's going on otherwise. So, when I seen the BBC documentary, the first one, and then there was a second one released like a couple of months later.
Yeah.
It was probably when the second one was released, and I remember vividly. I mentioned it the last time we were on. A woman who was a cleaner for Craig Whyte, and basically came in, and she wasn't paid the wages that she was owed. Um, and I just found that really strange, because I'm like, I mean, the woman's a cleaner. It's obviously not the highest paid job. Why can just pay this normal, everyday working class women her wages? It's the right thing to do. It's the proper thing to do. You've clearly got the money to do it. Why don't you do it? So when stuff like that happened, I was like, there's something wrong here. And there was also an incident, I think, well, this came out a few years later with Gordon Smith when he was brought in, where I think he got a phone call about a hotel bill from a pre-season tour in Germany that wasn't paid. So it was just really weird things going on, putting in weird bids for players, no paying hotel bills, um, you know, and owning previous businesses not paying normal members of staff. So it was probably around that point where it became more mainstream that I was thinking there's something right here. And then obviously we knew sort of late January when we had to sell Jelavic, that was really, and we couldn't bring in Daniel Kuzan. Remember that as well. We couldn't get a deal done over the line for a free agent. I was like, what's going on? And basically from that moment on, kind of knew that the league wasn't going to be won, and then it was all but confirmed a couple of weeks later, unfortunately.
The thing was as well, like when you look back, the first thing he does when he goes in, he stops paying VAT and PAYE.
Yeah,
You're doing that for a reason. He's doing that for a
Yeah.
reason. It's part of the was there a plan? That's the thing. I'll kind of never ever really, unless you spoke to the people involved, you would never ever be able to work out what actually the whole story of this was. But I think when he went in, he hoped he would win the tax case, which was meant to be announced in maybe something like, I think it was like October, November. I think it was meant to be announced that year. That get pushed back and pushed back. I think his plan was, and he'd never ever struck me as the smartest guy and things like that. But he went in there with a plan to put the club into administration as soon as possible, get them out of administration quickly, and then he would own it. That's what I think happened. That's what I think his plan was. Now, somewhere down the line, I think he was way over his head, because I think he was dealing with people way too smart for him. And it just seems like this guy. I mean, there's a famous story. I don't know if you've heard these as well. I mean, he would turn up in the back of a Vauxhall. Do you know what I mean? Like he was. I mean, there's a famous story of him the day after the day of the Kilmarnock game. He turns up to Ibrox in the back of it's like a Ford Focus or something. He wears buckles in his shoes. He was wearing, I think he was wearing like Marks and Spencer suits, something like that. Do you know what I mean? Like there's
should have upgraded to John Lewis.
Do you know what I mean, though? But that's the thing.
Yeah, it's like if you're a billionaire, we're all about humbleness here in Glasgow. But I mean, when you're a billionaire and you're showing up in a Marks and Spencer suit,
Yeah, you either stick to your roots, and you don't let the money go to your head, or you don't have a pot to pee in. And it was the latter. But at the time, it's like, wow, when you were hearing all these stories and things like that. But eventually, obviously, things start happening. There's a lot goes on. And then it comes out obviously about Tacitus, and that's at the point where you're like, this guy's a complete and utter bandit. Like that's horrendous. Like when you think of that though as well, like that was clearly what the plan was. That's what makes me think it was always going to be a Newco thing, because there was no way on earth you could sacrifice 4 years of season ticket money. You just can't do that. Do you know what I mean? That's £24 million worth of income over 4 years.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like that's you're never ever, you're not doing that unless you have a plan to put the club into that type of situation.
Yeah,
That's what I think.
yeah, I agree with you. To be honest, I think the whole Ticketus fiasco really was, well, it was a fiasco. I mean, and again, I'm thinking about blissful ignorance at the time. You're not wanting to believe it. You're maybe saying at the time, well, the fans would have paid it anyway. Do you know what I mean? So is it really the worst thing in the world? But that was money that, you know, wasn't accounted for. It wasn't, it was still in Rangers fans'
Yeah.
pockets, and I kind of feel like myself at the time, like, why did I not question it more? But, it's obviously stuff that, you need to get on with. But it was just when you think about it now, like that, can you imagine that happening now, like the next 4 years, a season ticket money, in fans' pockets, and it's just, you know, as you say, because it was a longer period of time, it wasn't as if it was doing this for one season or even two
Yeah.
seasons to get on like short-term cash flow. It was like the next 4 years or so. So as you say, this was a long-term plan, and we discussed it last time. Craig Whyte, basically his job was to come into, businesses that weren't doing well. And most of the time he just ended up putting them into administration and came out the other side doing well, whilst the people within the business, the employees and also the investors, whoever they were, came out at the bottom. So I think, maybe with Rangers, maybe it wasn't as sinister as that, maybe, but I think, you know, as you say, I agree, just getting way over his head. It gets to a point where, like went missing out in that Champions League money and even the Europa League money. And Craig White says it. I think it might have been the first interview actually. As soon as we go into admin, we basically needed that European money to get us through to the end of the season. So you know, I don't remember his face that you said there, but I can imagine just what the look in his face was at that Maribor game where that's when Europe's out of the picture completely, and it's just but to mortgage off basically 4 years worth of season ticket money. It's just unbelievable.
And I think as well, I think he hoped that if the club got into the Champions League, he could kind of sort that before it became public knowledge, and he could say, "Well, I was just securing the." He would have probably have got away with it to a degree
Yeah.
if there was money coming in, but he was absolutely snookered at that point. And then obviously, we're near enough coming up in 9 years, 11 years for recording as to when Rangers went into administration. It was round about the kind of mid-February. The day comes, and I remember, I'll never ever forget where I was sitting in the back of the car with my dad, and I just got a text on my phone saying Rangers going into admin, White's at court of session. And I remember saying, like, because you'd heard, like, you'd heard it happen to so many clubs, and like Portsmouth been a proper example, probably the most famous one to
Yeah,
me
that's
with
right.
Portsmouth
Yeah.
and Leeds, and you didn't think it would ever happen to your own club. And when it happened, it was just surreal. And I remember that night, White, do you remember having the police in front of him, right, reading a statement? And it was just like, this is mental. And he was, I mean, to do that, to have that was the last he was ever seen, because he was never seen again after that point. But what he managed to do, the one thing he managed to do in that time was obviously he managed to get in front of the tax man and bring in his own administrators. And this at the time was, we thought this was normal. This is what you do as a club going into administration, that the owner's allowed to appoint his own administrators. Little did we know, though, just how impactful that would be.
Yeah, I mean, going back there on the actual moment itself, talk about not forgetting where you were. Actually, I remember it was a Tuesday, to the best of my
I
knowledge,
think it
that it
was, yeah.
happened. But I remember on the Monday, the news broke that it was basically happening, and then it actually happened on the Tuesday. And I remember walking back from school. I didn't have a mobile phone or anything like that, so I'd left school at maybe 3 o'clock or whatever. Took maybe 45 minutes an hour to walk back, and by the time you walk in, Mom's like that. What's happening at Rangers, Craig? And I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like that. We're going into administration. I'm like, what? Turn on the news. And this isn't even, this is how big it was. It's not even, the first thing up on the STV News at 6 report in Scotland. It's the biggest thing on Sky News. It's the biggest thing on BBC News. It's gone worldwide. It was the biggest story in Britain, you know, for months and months and months. It's all anyone could talk about. And, you know, just madness, you know, just thinking how's it came to this. It was unbelievable and in a really, really bad way. As you say, you remember, I remember the Portsmouth one more vividly because that was about, what, 2009, 2010. And, you know, I was just like, it'll never come to that for Rangers, do you know what I mean? It'll never happen, but lo and behold, it didn't. And as you say, a bit strange that Craig Whyte managed to get in his own administrators. But yeah.
Aye, I mean that was the thing as well. Like when you look back at this, you're thinking like I remember the first. I remember running home from school. Actually, the first day, the first Duff and Phelps press conference. I remember running home from school was very early. I might have had a really old like iPhone. The first iPhone maybe was around about that time. Like I remember having an old iPhone and just been every day because you remember as well. Every day there was something else coming out. They were the days where I was buying a paper before school. And every day you were just reading it. I remember buying a paper at Work Experience and sitting in the staff room where I was reading it. And this guy who was there about 40, 50 years older than me, was like reading the paper next to me, and I was just ended up just talking because it was every day there was something different. And I remember there was so much going on. And you remember like so much happening. You were hearing. Remember Whyte? I think Whyte was on with Jim White maybe in Sky Sports News. And he was talking, and Jim White, to be fair to him, was asking him question after question, and he was just denying everything, just nothing. Like he would say, I think it was. Remember the Arsenal shares thing as well? He kept getting quizzed about Arsenal shares in Arsenal, and he would just deny it, and you were hearing, and that like message boards and things like that, and it was. Do you remember like there was early days of Facebook and Twitter was just kind of coming on the scene, kind of thing. And even you weren't really on there. It was more like the kind of message boards and things like that, and the kind of forums. And you were just reading things. You were just horrified at what you were reading. But it kind of just the 3 months. It was all about just trying to get the club into a good order. I remember, like when you were hearing kind of people who was kind of coming in, the likes of Brian Kennedy, Paul Murray, the guy from America as well. There was always that feeling that there was going to be somebody coming in. I always felt. You never ever felt it was going to be what the worst thing was feared which was liquidation. And that was you never ever thought it would come to that. Even right up until it happens, you're thinking that it can't happen that way.
Yeah, I was the same. I mean, one thing about Craig Whyte as well, in front of the cameras in a media capacity, the guy never looked comfortable. He always looked shaky. He always looked shaky. He always looked nervous, as if. I don't know, just as if he was maybe being watched, or you know, he always felt the pressure when it came to face interviews.
We spoke about that last time as well. Like when you're a successful businessman, you do go through some sort of media training. You're coached, and it wasn't. It was terrible in front of a camera.
Yeah, it was awful. But you know, moving on from that as well, it's like going into the sort of liquidation process. As you say, you never thought it would come to that, and that whole week was really weird because it was obviously the last week of the season. We played St Johnstone, and it would have been the 13th of May, I think, 2012, because at the same time Man City were winning the league against QPR. And I remember being up in Perth that day and listening to that game on the radio to like coming back down when Aguero scored that goal. So I never got to see it live, but I heard it, and the whole bus went into raptures. But it was weird because it was like a couple of days before. I think it was it Brian Kennedy that was made the preferred bidder? I can't remember if it was him.
Bill Miller.
Bill Miller, sorry, that was it. Bill Miller. And then like all of a sudden, within the space of a day, Charles Green's just appeared, this random guy.
That day's the couple of days are very interesting because Bill Miller gets named the preferred bidder on the Friday, and I remember this so specifically. Bill Miller gets named the preferred bidder on the Wednesday. 2 days later, it's reported Bill Miller is pulled out completely. He's released a statement. He's pulled out. The only thing I can gather is he is looked into the finances, looked into the debts and things like that, and thought, I'm out
no
of there,
chance.
no chance. And you say that Sunday it was out the blue. This guy, this yachtsman, Charles Green, just appeared on the scene, and it was literally that quick. There was nothing about him beforehand, not a word, until that Sunday.
It was weird. I mean, I where I was sitting in McDermott Park, it was in that sort of, it was in the main stand. And I remember looking over, and you could actually get a glimpse of him. And I remember seeing him in a club tie, and I was like, oh, that's a bit weird. He's been here for a couple of minutes. He's already got, I know, he's already got a club. I'm like that. Oh, okay. But it just came out of nowhere. In fact, I think people were hearing about this maybe even for the first time going up to the game.
Yeah, I think they were, because it was it broke that day.
It was complete and utter madness. Rangers won 4-0. I think McCulloch scored the hat.
I think you're right. Yeah.
McCulloch or Aluko scored the hat. I can't remember. But it was just weird. The whole thing was really weird. And then that summer was just, I thought it couldn't be topped. I mean, it probably hasn't been. I was thinking maybe the one a couple of years ago when the season shut down. That was pretty good for drama. But to be honest, I don't think you can, in terms of drama, you can top that the summer of 2012. I mean, you'd hope that, but somebody doesn't write a Bryan Adams song about it. But it was just every single day. Rangers were punch bags in the press. On telly, and the radio, in the papers. And then when it got to the point of, which we'll come on to, obviously the relegation, the votes, the way that owners acted, the way that Scottish football as a whole acted, it was mad. That's really the only word you can use to describe it.
Yeah, like we spoke about that as well when we were going through it, like previously. Like, I will never ever understand that. I know I've been around. We've been around Scottish football for a long time. There is a bitterness towards Rangers. There is a lot more than there is towards Celtic, and that's clear to see. But I will never understand a fan of any other club who hates another team more than they support their own, to the point where they will withdraw money from their own club if they vote Rangers back into the league. I will never ever understand that. And if anybody says to me that they don't understand that, I don't understand what they mean, that to me is the worst form of bitterness you can get, because you are preferring to see people, do you know what I mean? Rangers fans, they're preferring to see Rangers fans not of their club than give money to their own club. And I will never ever understand that. Never understand how that goes through somebody's head. But it was that as well. You're right. It was just every day. They were digging up people. Tom Boyd, I remember they were digging up Tom Boyd every day for a quote, and he was more than happy to give out nonsense. And it was just that. They were just, that's what I say about the kind of purpose of things like fan media, like kind of we're both doing as well. Like,
yeah, I think just finding on Tom Boyd, because that got me remembering and starting to laugh here. I'm pretty sure Tom Boyd was in the press saying that he felt cheated because of the EBTs, and he felt that he was owed some of the 9 in a row championship medals, despite the fact that the EBTs never actually came in until pretty much when
2001.
Yeah. Which kind of sums up him.
Tom Boyd retired in 2001, I think. So that tells you everything. Tom Boyd's an idiot. Tom Boyd's an idiot. And I'm more than happy. I don't think I'll ever get Tom Boyd in an interview, and I don't really want to. But yeah, it was just that. I mean, there were Wraith Rovers chairman as well.
I remember that guy, Tumble Hutton.
Yeah, Tumble Hutton. That was that. I think he's no longer with us as well. So
it was weird. I think one thing that, you've mentioned there, obviously, about hating Rangers and more than loving your own club, which I completely agree with. One thing I will say on it, I can understand Celtic fans being bitter and all that towards Rangers fans, because that's always going to happen. Do you know what I mean? But what was really annoying me was, the clubs, these clubs that disguise themselves, in my opinion, as big clubs. Your Hibs, your Aberdeen, your Dundee United, especially Dundee United. The way that Stephen Thompson was acting during that period was nothing short of a disgrace. When you've got guys like that turning around and saying we were cheated out of this, that, what we get cheated out of? I mean, with the 2008 League Cup final, where you were in the league twice, and was it EBT's fault that Mark Kerr passed that ball back to Chris Boyd, and you couldn't keep out a few penalties, just ridiculous stuff. And I always knew that the old, oh, no one likes us and all that. I
Yeah,
always knew that Rangers were kind of seen as the bad guys in Scottish football, but I think deep down you always felt that there was maybe a mutual respect there in some way, but never realised it was that bad, that raw, and that real until that summer, where you're like, these people hate us and they will do anything in their power to make sure that we don't come out of this on the other side. And you know, we know that Rangers were always going to come through it in one way or another, which we did. But just the bitterness that some people have, even still to this day, I just don't understand it. I just don't get it.
and it isn't made as clear as the fact that when Rangers score against Celtic, Celtic don't even mention Rangers by name, and it's just it is that it's just, do you know what I mean, holding on to the past, and there is a resentment that Rangers come through. There is, and
Oh yeah,
that's the thing that I mean, full credit to that. Then we'll speak about the support later on, who just they ploughed through it. They just everything they were getting. But I remember I can't remember who it was, and I think it was maybe Gordon Waddle had put a thing out in I think he was working for the Daily Record at the time. I might be wrong, and his thing was Rangers fans aren't sorry enough. What did Rangers fans do? What was Rangers fans' responsibility and all that? Do you know what I mean? Like it's that I will
well,
never understand that.
do you know what? I tell you something what Rangers fans done during that period. If we all remember the fighting fund and all that happened. See little stuff like that was started by the fans. You get your jibe still to this day about pay the face painter and all that. Rangers fans, raised money like that to pay off the small creditors that were owed money, your small businesses, your shops, your face painters, your
Yeah,
groceries, you know, and really the only people that were left out of pocket from the whole fiasco back then is HMRC, your big organisations that, whilst not saying it was right, what had happened, they can obviously cope with that more than what small businesses could cope with. So that's what Rangers fans were doing. Rangers fans were basically trying to take as much responsibility as they could for other people's actions.
yeah.
And I think that is something that Rangers fans generally do. I mean, we seen even, a couple of years ago after winning the league when, all the stuff happened in George Square with the benches and all that. The very next day, Robert Marshall for the Loudon Taverns organising a GoFundMe to make sure that Rangers fans pay for the repairs. And it's kind of like, if you do that, okay, not right, but take responsibility for it, own up to it, and pay for it. And Rangers fans were doing that back in 2012, even when they didn't need to do it. It wasn't their responsibility to pay these small businesses. It was the regimes that were in charge. So for somebody like that to turn around and say, "Oh, but was Rangers fan and all that, they're not sorry enough." Well, no, that doesn't sit right with me.
Do you know?
That's
Yeah,
that's what was happening back then.
yeah. Do you know the one that sticks out for me? Do you remember round about that time David Weir had retired,
Yeah.
and he get presented with it was like a vase or something in the park at half time. It was like a week before administration, and it turned out the engravers hadn't been paid.
Mm.
A week after that, the same engraver was in the TV saying Rangers fans had went and just gave him the cash, and that shows you that never. Do you know what I mean? That never gets commented on. Just how that happens. I don't think you see that happen in very many places. Kind of thing. Like, do you know what I mean? Like things like that. It's just wee stories like that. But again, it's just this time. We'll never ever get out of that. It's just that it's the way the country is and how Rangers are viewed in the country is just it's that way. And I do try to be as neutral as possible, but at that time I thought it was total bitterness, and I still stand by that. It's these clubs did not. Do you know what I mean? They were more interested. They were more interested in seeing Rangers suffer than their own incomes.
Yeah, well, the irony of it is, I mean, I know, I think it was Neil Doncaster at the time said Armageddon, and a lot of people said that was overstated. But when you look back on it, the intervening years, it really was. I mean, in a period of, I think, 4 years or something like that, you had Dundee United, Hibs, and Hearts relegated from the SPL on multiple occasions. Teams that, you know, Aberdeen, sorry, I don't know why I mentioned Aberdeen. They've never been relegated, even though they should have been. But that's for another day. But like Hearts and Hibs, you're like, they're two of the biggest clubs in Scotland. They'll never go down. You know, it opened up, the Rangers stuff opened up a can of worms for other clubs, and it seemed to be that if you were maybe, I don't know, a Livingston, a St Johnstone, a level below, like a Hibs, a Hearts, an Aberdeen, a Dundee United, if you're
Yeah.
one of the clubs, you were maybe okay because you kind of knew how to cut your cloth. But
Mhm.
if you were a Hearts, if you were a Hibs, if you were a Dundee United that relied on those games against Rangers and Celtic, because you see, the likes of Livingston, for example, right? We'll use them now. They obviously give Rangers and Celtic 3 stands each, right? But Livingston are quite clever and they don't budget for that to happen every season.
Mhm.
They're not, they've had their problems before Livingston, but I can't see them having that anymore. But
Yeah.
your Aberdeen, your Hearts, your Hibs, etc., they're spending all that extra income that they might get off Rangers and Celtic fans on players. You know, they're constantly trying to keep up with Rangers and Celtic, even though it's impossible for them to do so.
Mhm.
So to have 3 clubs like that get relegated, you know, it was Armageddon. And you look at the state of Scottish football as a whole and Europe, um, hardly qualifying for, the Champions League. Even when Celtic were in the Champions League, they were doing horrifically. Um, you know, other teams getting knocked out in like the first qualifying round and all that in Europe. The national team, um, you know, went through and possibly even worse than Betty Votes, to be honest, because at least back then the team was decent. It was just the manager that was crap. But the whole, empty seats everywhere, especially at Celtic Park, even though Rangers apparently weren't the big attraction. But, you know, there's a massive irony there, and I remember the sign that the Rangers fans had up, might have been the last game of the season, sink us and we'll sink you. And
Mhm.
I think a few teams were definitely sunk.
Yeah. And again, obviously Rangers do end up having to go to the third division, and this journey starts, and there was a bit of madness to it. So those 3 years on the field, it was just, I mean, you were going to places you never thought you would go to. I remember going to Annan. I remember going to Annan, and it was like you were in a tin, you were in a tin shack. And when you like obviously doing what I'm doing kind of things, you're going to clubs like junior clubs and things like that, and you're going there and but they're not built for fan bases like Rangers. That's the thing.
Yeah, the whole thing was mad. I mean, the infamous first game, the breaking hedge. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? A ball getting stuck in it. But do you know what? I mean, I'm trying to be a wee bit more positive here. That is kind of like what you love about it. Like, see now you can look back and kind of go, do you know what? That was this series is called. We're talking about a journey.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's a story. As we mentioned the last time, Steven Spielberg probably couldn't have came up with this. Um, that's what it is. It's a story, and it's about that is what football and sports about. It's about those stories, and in my opinion, anyway, the rise of Rangers from that point in early 2012 up until now, the Europa League final last year. I think it's one of the best, if not the best, story that's ever been told in sport.
Yeah, I was speaking to my dad a couple, like, see when Rangers reached the final Europa League, and I says to my dad, I says, I remember sitting, going to, I can't remember where we were going to. I remember sitting and going, did you ever think we'd be doing this? And we were going to like a game. It was like an away game somewhere. I was raced maybe, and we were sitting and just going, do you think like when we were in Manchester 5 years ago, you would ever be in this position? You were in the third tier of Scottish football, and then when Rangers reached the final of the Europa League, I says to my dad, I says, see when we were sitting that day going up to where we were going, did you ever think Rangers would be in a European final again? And it is that thing, it's like, it's so mad. But
Yeah,
as you say, it's, you couldn't write this. And that is the journey of it. It's like there's so many stories like that. Like it's things happen now on the field. Things were kind of things did calm down, to be fair, after everything kind of sorted out with the liquidation and things like that, and kind of the lower leagues. Very quickly though, it turned to crap pretty quickly when Charles Green was it was revealed that Mr. Charlie Boy was up to all sorts and signing all these bad deals, and the infamous pitch to the supporters who poured the money into him, to be fair. And
yeah,
again, it just descended into madness. It did. It was just that those 3 years to me were worse than admin. And I know that people will find that weird that I'm saying that, but it was the characters that were coming in. And it was grim. I remember just hearing these stories about who was coming in and what they were up to. And I mean, wow. I mean, how long have we got?
I know. I mean, it was like there was a new. Forget about the new story every day that was coming out in summer of 2012. Like by the time it got to, as you say, it did calm down. It probably wasn't until 2013, maybe when to most of the supporters are thinking, right, there's something wrong happening here again. But there was a period then for maybe then up until when King and etc. came back in, that it was like forget about the new story every day about Rangers. It was like who was the new face on the Rangers board, who was the new chairman, to a point where I remember there was a sketch or no, an excuse run about that time, and it was like today we're going to decide the new chairman of Rangers, and it's like 10 businessmen and play the music, and then they'll play musical chairs, and then it's the loser that gets to become the Rangers chairman. But like that, it was true. That's
Yeah.
pretty much what was happening. And it's like you'll mention names to me probably in the next few minutes, and I'll be like, I completely forgot that person even existed.
Yeah.
There was that many people, that many things going on, and I think as you touched on earlier, we'll talk about them. The fans, the way that they stood behind the team in different ways, not just by going to the games, but eventually by not going to the games. I think had a big bearing on what was to come soon after.
Yeah, and we'll have to spend a minute talking about the Chuckster, even though he's a poisonous individual. When he was, I mean, he hoodwinked the support. He absolutely did. He was this. He just seemed to be this kind of Fagin. Then he was just a guy he would literally say anything. And if you don't believe me, 2 words: Dallas Cowboys.
Mm-hmm.
Like he would
You're
say
right.
literally anything just to get the supporters and on board. And he was just a bad guy. But he was a leech. He was a leech. He saw an opportunity to pounce, and that's why I'll never ever forgive Murray. And that sort of thing is the reason, because Murray sold the club. He knew he had to know about Craig Whyte. The thing of he was duped, and we went into this previously. David Murray doesn't get duped. He's too clever.
Mm-hmm.
He's too smart. So he allowed somebody like Craig Whyte to come in, and then Craig Whyte obviously couldn't handle what he was doing, and he was a bad guy as well. But for these guys then to come on board, Murray allowed that by selling it to them, and that's why I'll never ever forgive him. And for somebody like Green to come on board and just immediately just rip the club apart and leech off it, hoodwink the supporters, sell them a bill of goods, that's exactly what he did. He was just a horrible person for that club.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Charles Green is, I mean, obviously around about this time as well, there was a whole 5-way agreement about letting Rangers keep their leagues. And I can tell you something, if it was Charles Green that was in the meetings and no Alan McCoist, I mean, forget about taking back leagues that were won in the sort of early 2000s. Charles Green would have been given back the Cup Winners' Cup. He would have been given back trebles for years ago if it meant that he could save his own skin. That is the type of person that the guy was. He didn't care about the history of Rangers. He didn't care about.
He would have turned
this
Irish into an Aldi if he could.
I completely agree. It was just luckily for the Rangers support we had someone there like Ali McCoist, who clearly wasn't the best manager in the world, but my God, that guy's love for Rangers.
Yeah. And they're the two kind of guys, Ali McCoist and Sandy Jardine. There's a reason we had them as the photo for an episode, as they were the two stalwarts that just carried the club at this point, because there was a couple of guys maybe in the board at the time who you could tell they maybe did have that, like Graham Wallace. I think he did have good intentions, but I just think he was kiboshed at every opportunity. I'm going to throw some names at you, and you can just give me a shrug or something like that. Just like the likes of Imran Ahmed. I mean, that guy was just Charles Green 2.0. Stockbridge, I just don't. Do you know what I mean? Just a horrible guy. The Easdales. I think the Easdales. I mean, we've spoke about them before as well. They were sold a dream. They were absolutely sold a dream. They should never have been anywhere near the club, never. But Green sold them a pack of lies as well, and I think they just get romanticised with the whole thing, but they should never have been allowed anywhere near it.
Yeah, it was, it's one thing going for doing the buses and Greenock to then going to Ibrox. I think with the Easdales, as you say, they just shouldn't have been there. And I think they probably did eventually realise that when they were in, they're probably going, I mean, the people that we're dealing with was on a completely different level to what
Even
we're
to
used
them,
to.
yeah, that's the thing. Even to them, it was a different level they were working with, and there was the one guy at the time who comes in and immediately just what's going on at this point was Mike Ashley. That's, I mean, the infamous Sports Direct deal. I mean, Rangers are just out of that. Do you know what I mean? That was an anchor over the club for so long. But I think that was the one thing that the board, when they were when the money was disappearing, like things like that, the one thing they could say is that we've got Mike Ashley. Mike Ashley's a billionaire, and that was legit. But the problem is that Mike Ashley wasn't in there to help Rangers.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of, well, it's not similar to Newcastle because, but what I'm probably trying to say is, if I can get the words out, sorry, like Mike Ashley's always going to be out for Mike Ashley. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The guy, need to give him his credit in terms of his business acumen. He's clearly very intelligent in terms of the way that he operates. He knows what he's
Absolutely.
doing. He's seen an opportunity in Rangers. He obviously knew that the company was vulnerable. And if you look at the people that he would have been dealing with as well, would have probably been very easy to push them around.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you're Mike Ashley, a guy that's used to having his own way, he is a billionaire. We know that for a fact, unlike some that we've discussed. And I think the Sports Direct deal, I mean, certainly back in 2014, something like that. I mean, what were Rangers getting for every strip?
Three pence in the pound or something. It was something like
It
that. Do you know what I
was
mean?
just, yeah, like, I mean, there's bad business deals and then there's bad business deals, but just ridiculous. And thankfully, we're out of that deal now. But again, that's one of the sort of the things that keep running on from this. I mean, another thing that I will say, you get people that turn around and will go, 2012 was 10, 11 years ago. You can't keep talking about it, but it's still relevant even now when you look at Rangers' current financial position. And Rangers are in a good financial position, but we would have been in this position maybe 5, 6 years ago if certain things didn't happen. Catering deals, only getting out of them just now. Sports Direct deal only got out of that 2 years ago. We've been up in the SPL, SPFL for 4 years by the time we got out of the Sports Direct deal. So you're dealing with that for 4 years. That's clearly going to have an adverse impact on the club and as a team as a whole. So we're really only now, getting back into the Champions League this year, getting to the Europa League final, selling assets for big money. We're only now getting to a point where we're becoming self-sustainable. So I know people get annoyed and all that when you talk about what happened 10 years ago, 11 years ago, but it's still relevant, unfortunately. It's just one of those things that's going to keep being relevant until it's not.
Yeah, and the support as well. Like they absolutely starved the board out, obviously with the boycott and things like that. But the good guys eventually, like King, Murray, John Gilligan as well. They're always the three to me. Like I know kind of the three bears as well. They deserve their share of the adulation, and rightfully so. But Dave King, I think at the time with me, I was thinking, does Dave King have the best intentions? Because is he in just to get his money back? Again, at the time, I think it was this whole period of you were just thinking you were just negative thoughts all the time. And I'm still quite guilty of that as well. Anytime you hear anything positive regarding Rangers, you've always get a slight worry because of this period. You've always got something in the back of your mind. But when those guys came in, when they eventually kind of wrestled power, I've heard this specifically from somebody who was there. They went in there and the place was horrendous. There was nothing in it. Absolutely nothing in it. And I want to tell a wee story. Do you remember when Ashley gets security of the training ground.
Yeah.
He had appointed 2 guys onto the board by the name of Derek Lambias and Barry Leach. Now, Barry Leach was I think he was something like the finance director for a company that I worked for. And I went into the company maybe 2017. A few days later, Barry Leach was appointed there, and I was like, oh dear. 2 years later, Mike Ashley wants to buy that company. Does that strike you as a bit of a coincidence?
I think it may be a wee bit more than a coincidence. I think that is very,
But
very
that's
weird.
what goes on in these places, though. That's what it's all about. Just trying to do the best thing possible for Mike Ashley. That's what it was, and the fight those guys had to put up to get in there. I mean, I remember the day the EGM, hearing that the guys won. We knew they were going to win. Let's be honest, but just hearing that those guys were in, just that phrase, "safe pair of hands," and that was just. I mean, that was. It wasn't. It didn't completely, like, make everything good, but you knew that we were on the right track.
Yeah, on the right track. The exact way to sum it up. And we all remember the scenes outside. I think it was the Argyle House. You've got, you know, the 3 of them with their hands up, you know, in victory, and the fans cheering, the fans applauding. Compare and contrast that to 3 years earlier, with what was happening outside Ibrox, night and day. And you know, it was the positivity that the club needed at the time, because that season, the first one in the Championship, was, I mean, horrendous. Doesn't even cover it. And you know, let's not go over what was happening on the park, especially with the re-signing of Chris Boyd, which was very weird. But just a wee bit of positivity. And well, I know I said let's not talk about it, but for the rest of that season, you know, whilst, you know, we never get promoted and all that, you could sense there was more positivity in the air. You know, fans started to come back. The team were playing a wee bit better, you know, because I think that did affect them. All the stuff that was going on, it must have, because, you know, they're thinking, you know, the company that I'm working for here's, you know, in trouble. We don't know what's going to happen. Is their job safe and secure? Who knows? And you know, you did see a bit of a lift, and then obviously, the rebuild, the proper rebuild began, because it kind of seemed like, whilst we were in a journey, we were making our way back up the leagues. Might have been doing that, but in terms of off the field, we weren't progressing at all. In fact, we were getting worse. So we were getting in a worse and worse situation as we were competing against better and better teams. Up until, you know, King, etc., took over, and obviously we had the playoffs against Queen of the South, Hibs and Motherwell, and you know, that happens. But we then get Mark Warburton, and I think, when, you know, I would count the time as Mark Warburton coming in as a sort of start of a new sort of period for Rangers, where it's now, you're talking about, if things are bad, it's just on the pitch that it's bad. Do you know what I mean? Like, everything else, it will kind of take care of itself.
I remember Mark Warburton coming in, and this is why I kind of maybe have a more lenient approach to Mark Warburton's time than a lot of other people, because I remember Mark Warburton.
I thought Mark Warburton was decent. It's just, I think we've used this phrase before, maybe a wee bit too big, you know, over his head, way in over his head, you know, in terms of when we got back up. Could he really, was he a Rangers manager? Probably not, but I think he's a great guy. You know, he done what he had to do at the time in terms of getting us back up. He gave us a style, you know, had that one against Celtic at Hampden, which was great, and you know, it gave us a wee bit of good times back that we hadn't had for,
and that's
for,
the thing.
for several years.
That's why, like, when I think of Mark Warburton, I think of, that was the time I enjoyed going back to Ibrox.
Yeah,
that time, like, see, just, I know that, I mean, it was a lot better to watch, for example, but you knew there was a bit of a swagger back as well. When those kind of years after that, like, obviously, like, when King, like, when Rangers get back into the SPL and things like that, and there was just always that set. They were miles behind where they needed to be. Celtic were obviously going through their own bit of transition as well when they brought in Brendan Rodgers, and they were a lot better than they were certainly when Rangers weren't there. But you always felt like, you don't like getting beat off Celtic if you're a Rangers fan. You don't. But it it was nothing really compared to what you were dealing with a couple of years before. Like, do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
the 5-0, the 4-0s, and 5-1 home and away, and Mikkel Lustig running for the halfway line to score a goal against it. They were humiliating. Yep, absolutely. But you still felt as if there was something brewing. You still felt as if the Rangers were getting closer. And then obviously Steven Gerrard comes in.
yeah,
That felt big. That felt like the tip where you thought, this is because Celtic were going for 10 in a row, and I know you're the same as me. That was in the back of your mind constantly. Like, Celtic could get 10 in a row, and it would be different. That would be the ultimate humiliation, I think, for a Rangers fan at the time.
yeah.
Would you go along with that?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think we can all talk about the off-field stuff, as we say, on the pitch is what matters, and that whole period. You know, I think hindsight's a wonderful thing. You know, when you look back on it now, Rangers were miles behind. So obviously on pretty much at a level playing field now, but back then it was never seen anything like it before.
Yeah,
I doubt you'll see anything like it again in terms of different. But we're not even talking about. I know Celtic had their unbeaten season and whatnot, but I still don't think that's an unbelievable Celtic team. Do you know what I mean? Had a few good, I've had a few decent players that have went on to have, decent careers down south, but not anything, unbelievable. But when Rangers are that bad, it's kind of like, well, you've not, not really got a place to sort of be slagging them. But it was just, it was hard those first couple of years coming back because, the hope was always there that you could
yeah,
do something, but realistically, it was just never going to happen. And you mentioned Gerrard there, that did kind of feel like a sliding doors moment. The board did. I don't know. I wouldn't go far as to say they backed Mark Warburton. I felt that in the summer that we came up, I felt that they could have gave him more money because I think you look at when Pedro came in, he got a lot more money to spend than what Warburton did. So I felt maybe the board could have done a wee bit more there that summer. Celtic would have probably still went on and won the league and all that, but you never know. Could have picked up a couple, whatever, and you stopped that run of trebles that happened
yeah,
as well. But Gerrard coming in, that was a kind of sliding doors moment, and everything seemed to change from there on in, and it got to a point where Rangers we could really only go up, but Rangers were going up, but at the same time, Celtic were going down when they realised there was an actual challenge there. I mean, probably talk a wee bit more in depth coming up about the sort of 3 seasons, but it was like each of those 3 seasons under Gerrard were like a big, massive journey in itself with so many ups and downs and, you know, getting better and then stagnating after the winter break and then, getting better, nearly winning the League Cup, beating Celtic at Celtic Park, stagnating after the winter break again
yeah.
up until obviously winning the league. So it was definitely a sliding doors moment.
Yeah, and there's so many, like, obviously at that point as well, like Gerrard, the first 2 seasons there was progression, kind of European runs as well were outstanding. The cup final, again, we're 2 weeks away from another cup final. I've never been as sore watching Rangers in that cup final against Celtic because they dominated them and just Celtic obviously scored with their one chance. But the season Gerrard wins the title, what was the kind of memories of that? Because obviously it was a very weird season for other reasons that no
Yeah,
fan could get in, but Rangers were just on it from the word go, and that to me. That's why we end this at 2021 because that is the culmination of the journey. Because it was, I would say, maybe not. It isn't a 10-year journey. It's a longer journey than that to get back. Because when 1988 Rangers are dominant, Rangers are top of the tree in Scotland. Soon as Murray comes in. 2021 Rangers are fighting to get back to that. Rangers are fighting just to get that league title that they haven't had in so long. And it is this journey that takes over 30 years. And it's just twists and turns, so many ups and downs, but that title just felt that was the culmination.
yeah. I mean, I would go as far as saying it's the most important title in Rangers history.
Yeah.
I think, people, regardless of what age you are, they're always going to remember that. Um, and I knew, like, see that Aberdeen game, the first game of the season, as soon as we played that, I was like, we're winning this league. I knew we were winning it. I mean, because I always felt I felt eventually the way that things were going with Gerrard that we were going to win the league. Because as I say, Rangers were getting better. and Celtic were gradually getting worse. And I said that to my Celtic supporting friends at the time. I went, okay, you're winning this, you're winning that. I went, but it will stop eventually. And they didn't seem to think that that was going to happen. It's like, take for example the League Cup final. Obviously they've won it and all that. They're going to be bragging about it, but it was like not even bragging, like just sheer arrogance, as if like use are bad and stuff like that. And it felt like when Gerrard was there, when something bad happened, Celtic fans, when they were slagging off Rangers fans, it was as if Pedro was in charge or Murray was in charge. And to be honest, it kind of still is the same now. I still don't think there's still quite a few Celtic fans, I think, that still believe that Rangers are stuck in this sort of period where they've got no money, they're bad, they've got a clown in charge of them. Like that's never going to happen again, ever. Um, so as I say, when when something goes up, something comes down, you're going to meet in the middle eventually, and eventually the thing that's pushing up is going to get better, and that's exactly what happened that season. The pre-season friendlies were good in terms of the performances. We played, I think, Coventry, a couple other ones. We just looked like a different animal in those games, and I know friendlies and all that, but then going up to Pittodrie, I've never seen a performance like that at Pittodrie by Rangers in terms of just dominating the ball, and then it was like after that, every single game you're like that, we're going to win this. And Celtic, started that season points wise the same as Rangers, but the performances weren't great, and you could tell that something was going to happen. And I'd always said for the period that Gerrard was in, put them under a wee bit of pressure because, for all the trophies and stuff like that that the Celtic team has won, have they ever actually been under that much pressure? I mean, Rangers had never been top of the league properly in that time. The only time I think Rangers were top of the league is maybe when Celtic had a game in hand over them. So technically Celtic were still top.
Yeah.
But it was never, Rangers were always, maybe one match day in front, if that kind of makes sense. But that game at Celtic Park, the 2-0 were Goldson scores, played them off the park, and that's like, as I say, I knew that Aberdeen game just watching it. I was like, we're a different animal now. And then that game, another one that was probably a sliding doors moment, more so for Celtic, I think, realising that this Rangers team means business. And it was just like after that game, after Rangers dominated Celtic, Celtic just collapsed, drop points after drop points. Rangers keep winning. And then, Rangers go on and win the league. But it was an incredible season. Definitely the most important championship in Rangers history. Um, and just the scenes and the emotion and everything about that. Very, very difficult to top.
Yeah, very difficult to top. I think that's the right word. That whole thing, like you remember, like as you say, it's right in the middle of COVID, and it was. I mean, it's been done to death, relentless. It was non-stop, and that's the thing. Like obviously, with that closing, and we spoke about it obviously when the league was won. We're now at the stage where, in kind of 2 years on from Rangers winning the league, the current board are in place, and we see obviously at times they can make a lot of mistakes. But the one conclusion I would give the current board is, and I'm not a defender of them always, as you'll know, I can sometimes be maybe too critical on them. I don't think the current Rangers board are out there to hurt anybody. I think they're there. I think they have good intentions. I don't think they go about it the best way a lot of the time. But I always am confident that they are the right people. They have the right idea for what they want to do.
Yeah, I mean, like, in a way, I'm kind of glad the stick that the board get for stupid things because it means that, what happened to Rangers all those years ago will never happen again.
Yeah.
Because if you're scrutinising the board over, small things like sponsorships on the back of shirts, do you know what I mean? Like, that Rangers
don't even get me started in Edmiston House packages, by the way. Do you know what I mean? But that's the sort of thing.
It shows you about how far everything's came, and like, I'm not a happy clapper. I'm not a big owner as well. I kind of find myself as quite balanced. But one thing I will say, very similar to you, this Rangers board, they aren't out to hurt anyone. I think they do have the best interest of the club at heart. The communication can be improved sometimes,
Yeah.
but it's the same with any organisation, any business, whatever. Nothing's going to be perfect. But I think you know, if the right feelings are there from within, which they are, and they are all Rangers men, we know that they want the club to do well. Um, I think Rangers are going to be fine. I mean, and I kind of like the structure that Rangers have got just now, where it's you've not got one big owner
Yeah.
that's taking all the decisions. You've got a collective. You've got, I mean, compare it to Celtic, for example. You've got Dermot Desmond, who controls pretty much everything. He's the one guy there. Whereas he's obviously really, really wealthy. Whereas at Rangers, you've maybe got 4 or 5 guys who are not as rich as Dermot Desmond, but if you put it together, probably at that level,
Yeah.
and they've all got a kind of more or less an equal say, or maybe not an equal say, but they've got a big say in the running of the club and what happens. And all I'm going to say is, I mean, you know, compare again to Celtic, look at maybe what happened with the Rangers under David Murray. You know, every sort of scandal in football ownership always seems to come from one person
Yeah.
owning the club. It never seems to come from fan ownership or, kind of the system that Rangers have got. It always comes from one person running the club. Now, we've seen in the 90s with the Kellys and stuff like that, the way that they were running Celtic, then Fergus McCann came in and Dermot Desmond came in. Now, obviously, Celtic have evolved from then. They're in a great financial position now compared to what they were in the 90s. But the same thing remains in the fact that it is still one person running the show now. We don't know what's going to happen with Dermot Desmond in terms of he's getting older. You know what's going to happen with his health and stuff like that. I know his son's there, but his son might not have the drive to do it. What if a situation happens like David Murray, where his other businesses start to take a pounding, and then you go, well, I can't focus on the football club anymore. I need to focus on my actual businesses here. Um, so that is always a possibility that it could happen under Celtic, but with Rangers in the structure that they've got just now, that's just never going to happen because even if Douglas Park loses all his wealth, even if parts of Hamilton go under, right, which they won't because they're very well run, but even if it was to happen, you've still got tons of guys there that are worth, millions and millions of pounds that can clear it up, and they'll be able to find someone. What the people on the Rangers board know is they know money. They know guys that have got cash to invest. Um, you know, and you know, the Kyle Fox stuff I know was mentioned in the last few months about her coming in,
Yeah.
and the Rangers both kind of dismissed that in the sense that, well, you were wanting more than we were basically willing to sell for in terms of equity in the company. So it shows that this Rangers board are serious in terms of wanting people to have more of an equal say, um, which I think is good because I don't think um, it can happen again. And I don't think it will happen again where one man has that much power or control over Rangers Football Club. I just can't see it happening in my lifetime anyway.
Yeah. The one, like the final kind of thing before we wrap up, the one constant out of this whole journey, like players come and go, managers come and go, owners come and go. The one constant is the support. Just how big are they? How big were they in this whole period, and how much do they continue to be a big part of the club?
Well, they're the best support in the world, aren't they, the Rangers fans? And I'm being completely serious on that. I mean, you think of what everyone's been through the last 11 years, you know, many people would have stopped going, you know, for reasons out with the obvious ones that some Rangers fans stopped going in 2015. But, you know, I, I think earlier the stories that we told, obviously, about the engraver, about, the Rangers fans taking ownership, for me, that's kind of the legacy of the Rangers supporters from that time in terms of just how organic the sort of love is for them and their club. I mean, Rangers. I mean, Rangers are the biggest institution in Scotland, right? But I think people forget that this whole thing was started before teenagers walking through Kelvin Grove Park and, you know, kicking a ball about saying, we should probably start a team. It's so simple, but look what that's grown into. Do you know what I mean? And it's incredible. It's, as I've said before, it's, in my opinion, it's the greatest story that's ever been told in sport, you know, and the fans are just, they're that one constant. And, you know, you think of the people that, you know, are grown up now, sort of watching Rangers, you know, their 2012 and 2013 was our 2003 and 2005. You know, our dad's 92 and 93. And, you know, I'm also thinking about the fans that we've lost along the way, you know, friends, family, players, managers. You know, so just to get back to that moment of Rangers winning the league, it was really emotional. You know, and you know, I can't. That's the thing. I'm not usually one that's not get much to say, but like speechless. You know, in terms of how the fans are, because I think at the end of the day, everyone knows it. You know, and you don't need to say how good and how amazing the fans are, because they all know it. And as I say, because of the way that the fans are, Rangers Football Club will never ever be in the situation that they were in 2012 ever again. It will never happen again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the whole takeaway from this, is that the support are, you're constant. They're there. I mean, they'll, a moment's notice, they'll come out and, do you know what I mean? They'll 200,000 go to Manchester, 100,000 go to Seville, and they do that because they love
with no arrests.
With no arrests, correct. And
I demand a fair play award from FIFA.
Especially when you've no water as well.
Well, that's true. Well, how ironic.
But Craig, it's been a pleasure. It's been really enjoyable to go through this with you, and I really appreciate you coming on for the two parts. Thank you.
No, not a problem at all, mate. It's been good. It's been a really good discussion. I've enjoyed it. You know, going through some bad times, some good times, some more bad times, but ending it on a great note. And you know, as you say, it's been one hell of a journey, hasn't it?
It's been one hell of a journey, and we do have a final part. We're going to have a wee bonus Q&A. If you've got a question, then please send it in the comments below. We have had a lot of questions sent in as well, kind of privately and on like other posts as well. So if you do have a question, we'll try and get through it best we can in the next episode. And it's going to be the final episode of the Rangers journey. Thank you.